Greetings, Star Citizens, and welcome to Ship Updates. Now, you may detect from the tone of my voice that I am in something of a rare and upbeat mood, and that is because today, at the beginning of the show, I'm going to take a moment out to thank two subscribers, presumably, or at least viewers of this channel, for championing one of the causes that I have discussed at length on this channel for over a month now, and that is, of course, hover mode. Two individuals who went out in front of a bunch of people and basically reiterated everything I had said about hover mode and why hover mode didn't work pretty much verbatim. And those two people I'd like to single out are John Crew and Dave Colson. Now, of course, this show has more to do with ships, so we're not going to dig into this too far. We'll get into it on Monday, but I'm sure a lot of people probably thought, and you were right, that when I was watching this interview, I was just smiling from ear to ear. When they started talking about hover mode, I was just like, I told you. That's amazing. That was hilarious. And I was like, I almost feel like some of these questions are directed at me. Or at least I may be the driver behind some of these questions. That might be a little bit egotistical, but you'll know what I mean in a moment, because one of the things that they talked about was the Caterpillar. The issue with the Caterpillar they discussed was the detachable command module. Still in the works. They are facing some challenging issues, I guess, separating the ship into two separate entities where one controls both, or the command pod can separate and just control itself. That seems to be one of the hurdles that they're at. They were talking about it relative to the snub fighters, the detachable snub fighters, which are going to be implemented in the not too distant future with the constellations. So that's right, both the P-72 and the P-52 or P-51 Merlin are going to be functional at some point in the future, giving dates with Star Citizen, bit of a shot in the dark, but yes, the detachable command module is still a part of the equation. Though I would love to hear about some of the different cargo module options that we may have in the future. Now, of course, at this point you might be saying, well, geez, Minion, they talked about the Caterpillar, doesn't mean that they're fans of the show. Well, allow me to present Exhibit B. The Cutlass. Now, there wasn't specific news in regards to the Cutlass. Of course, we are all eagerly awaiting the release of the Cutlass Red and the Cutlass Blue. But CIG did reveal, when someone jokingly asked, why do you hate the Cutlass, or why do you hate Drake, rather, to John Crew, referring, of course, to the paper-thin comments that have haunted him for some time now. He did kind of extol the virtues of Drake and saying, while it is not, as strong as a dedicated military vessel, it is certainly up there in strength. And then later revealed that the Cutlass was possibly the second or third most flown ship in Star Citizen, which I think is a testament to just how great of a ship the Cutlass is. And, one of the reasons why I've been such a huge champion of this ship since the very beginning. The versatility, the capabilities that this ship entails. I mean, at one point, it was considered kind of like, almost in a derogatory way, the poor man's Super Hornet. And there is a teensy-weensy possibility that that may actually return, and that we may actually get control of our turrets back as pilots through the use of an AI blade, which they discussed, relevant to things like the 890 jump, which we're about to get into, but could be the old, well, back when we had control of the turrets, it was 5 guns that we could control gimbaled. We may be up to 6 at some point in the future. Fingers crossed. Now, moving on to the Vanguard Sentinel, an upcoming ship that, of course, we are all excited to see. Now, there are, of course, some limitations, as we expected, to the Sentinel as it's being implemented in the game, first and foremost, is the lack of an AR cockpit. Now, the AR, or augmented reality cockpit, that the ship was originally designated to come with is still something that CIG is investigating on how to best implement. One of the ideas that John Crew floated was the idea of ripping out the MFDs and replacing them with holographic displays, just, spitballing ideas here. Possibly another reason why he's a fan of the show is because this is something that I have suggested as well. In regards, I think, to another ship, but I think that was over a year ago. So, once again, thanks to a longtime viewer for paying attention. Now, the E-War pod is also not going to be included, nor are the decoy missiles. Currently, it is armed with regular missiles at this point, and E-War is still something that is up in the air, not in terms of whether or not we're going to get it, but in terms of what form it will take and what will be required. So currently it is coming with a gun loadout that is all distortion weapons, so that could be interesting in terms of helping stop or disable another ship. But you are going to be able to change those weapons. They talked about the Harbinger as well, and the Harbinger is something as well that is coming in the next patch in 3.7. And so the nose guns, not just the gimbaled weapon, but all the nose guns are going to be changeable with either distortion weapons, projectile repeaters, laser repeaters. So there's going to be a whole host of options available there. Now, I kind of wanted to focus on the Sentinel model because, of course, I have the Battlefield upgrade kit for the Sentinel and Vanguard Warden. And one of the things that they said was they kind of tried to differentiate the different models. They were talking about how the Harbinger was probably going to be a little bit more heavily armored, but a little bit slower. And the Sentinel was probably going to be a little bit more maneuverable or weaker than the Warden. I believe weaker was specifically what they said. And I'm guessing that is in terms of armor, possibly making the Sentinel, quote-unquote, paper thin. I'm just joking, of course. But that leads me to a big question, which is if you have the Battlefield upgrade kit that you are using to upgrade the Vanguard Warden to the Vanguard Sentinel, or to incorporate the capabilities of the Sentinel onto the Warden, does that weaker still exist? Because you're still using the hull of a Warden. So I think that might be an interesting workaround to those relative strengths and weaknesses of each model, using a Battlefield upgrade kit to be able to do those things. But once again, that is something that we're going to have to wait and test in 3.7, hopefully. Moving on to the Banu Defender. This was a specific question that they were asked in regards to its interplay with the Banu Merchantman. Now, I'm going to kind of go out on a limb here. They didn't really want to say what they had in mind, but I'm going to present you with what I think is the likely solution to this question. What is the likely answer to what the interplay is going to involve? Now, consider that, once again, the Banu Defender is supposed to guard the Banu Merchantman. They are supposed to fly together that is its purpose. It is there to defend the Banu Merchantman. Now, large ships and smaller ships have a considerable differential in the speed, through which they travel through quantum. And the only solution that I can see to solving this problem of, the longer the jump, the more time that the Banu Merchantman would wind up being, exposed to risk, exposed to danger, because its escorts are way further back and having to kind of catch up and try to rescue the Merchantman. The only solution that I can really see to this is that they are going to do a parasite fighter deal with the Banu Defender. They're going to make it, some way that, perhaps even through the prongs on the front of the ship, they're going to make those prongs kind of work its way around one of the pylons, probably on the top of the ship or possibly beneath the ship. So where the center kind of pylon of the ship, it will move up in between those two prongs And that entryway that you see in the ship will then become, a docking port that you can travel between one ship and the other. I think that's how they're going to do it. I'm going out on a limb here. I'm making one of my famous guesses / predictions, but I think that is how they're going to solve the problem, or at least the most likely outcome. That way, the Banu Merchantman can carry the fighters with it and deploy it should trouble occur, and it doesn't have to worry about them getting left behind in quantum and possibly not being able to show up on time or show up too late if the Banu Merchantman gets into trouble. That is what I think CIG is going to do with this ship. That is my prediction. Now, moving on to the 890 jump. Now, for those of you who are currently flying the 890 jump and not too impressed with its fuel consumption, CIG knows about this problem and acknowledges it. This is something that is going to be fixed in 3.7. They realize that this is kind of a double gut punch for you guys because the only place to really refuel these ships currently is to go and land on a planet, and landing on a planet, especially in a ship this big, is so fuel intensive that it can be, to say the very least, problematic. So they know about it, they're going to fix it. Now, moving on to some other 890 jump issues, the turrets, the armaments, the point defense turrets. So CIG's thinking here is that they are going to make it possible, and it is going to be included with the ship, from what I understood, that there are going to be AI blades that allow you to turn multiple turrets on the 890 jump, which already supposedly has more turrets than were originally included in the sale. I didn't have the time to go back and check on that, but they are going to allow you to basically turn a number of your turrets into automated defense turrets, kind of more or less becoming what they originally deemed as point defense turrets. They've stated that they've kind of moved away from that and, from that terminology. And so, these automated defense turrets are more or less the same thing. And that's just what they're calling it now. And you are still going to have that functionality through AI blades, which are going to be included with the ship once they are implemented within the game. Now, as for the upsizing of the admittedly slightly disappointing turrets that are on the 890 jump currently, I do agree that they do seem a little underdone. And if you see the screen shaking in the background, that's because I am kind of shaking my mouse and not all that happy that I literally just missed the train to Lorville. So they are potentially looking at, in the future, they may let this go for a while and then see how they feel about it. They are potentially looking at the possibility of not directly upgunning in terms of size the guns that are on the turret, but rather turning those guns, or those turrets rather, into quad turrets rather than dual turrets. Something that would probably be quite fitting considering the enormous price tag attached to the ship. Having the turrets that have pretty much the same firepower as something on the Caterpillar doesn't make a lot of sense, though obviously with a hell of a lot more defense and supplemental turrets than the Caterpillar has, but still those main turrets are kind of flimsy. So I would say probably something that should be implemented sooner rather than later. And finally, the Drake Buccaneer. The Drake Interdictor. Well, Interdictor no more. Now it is actually an interceptor, and the reason why it's an interceptor is because, it's supposed to have better control at very high speeds, much more so than other fighters do, and that's why it's called an interceptor, which, unfortunately, at this point, I have to kind of sit here and say, guys, do you remember what the interdiction thing was put there in the first place for? Let me remind you. Now, when we were originally proposed the Drake Buccaneer, this was all part of, the original Cutlass fiasco and some of the disappointment that the fans had expressed in regards to, the performance of the Cutlass, and some of which was justified. But, as I've said before, I had always believed that the Cutlass should remain as it is, and the alternative of another ship is very much preferable to getting rid of the Cutlass because it is so good. But, some people still wanted that light, nimble pirate fighter that was originally promised. So when the Buccaneer kind of hit the scene, CIG kind of laid it on a little thick with the Buccaneer, and they promised things like a little bit of cargo space, possibly some weapon racks to allow you to carry FPS weapons, and then these things were quietly dropped from the Buccaneer. But one of the things that remained, and in my opinion, was a little bit of an olive branch to the community, saying, hey, we did take away these things, but we're kind of leaving in this other thing possibly, is the possibility that the Buccaneer was going to have some kind of interdiction function. You'll remember that, this was a bit of a sore point between, the developers and the community, because, they had kind of pushed the Buccaneer right through into flight ready, and though they had paid a lot of lip service to the features like the cargo area and the weapon rack prior to actually putting it into the game, it was kind of blown off once they tried to complete it. And there were other things going on with that ship, and it's a little bit of a long story to get into, but interdiction was one of the places where pilots of the Buccaneer kind of held up hope that this was going to be kind of one of those features that did kind of make it back into the Buccaneer, that this was going to become part of it, and one of the reasons to kind of keep the Buccaneer, as the Buccaneer, in terms of performance, is good-ish, but lacks a certain something, and I think a lot of people out there were kind of holding out hope that the interdiction was going to remain, and that it was truly going to become an interdictor. To find out that that is not the case, and that it's just got slightly better performance at higher speeds, not really all that great. Though it does maintain, some of the features of other Drake ships, which is low maintenance costs, very no frills construction, much more rugged, though not, military in terms of strength, certainly in the case of the Buccaneer. I think that CIG what they've kind of come up against is the fact that what they're trying to do with interdiction is something that won't fit on the Buccaneer anymore, so they're trying to distance themselves away from it. Whether that's right or wrong, I leave that up to the community to decide. I'm unimpressed, but I am only one person. And with that, another episode of Ship Updates draws to a close. I would, of course, like to thank all of you for watching the show, and, of course, my Patreon supporters. And not only that, super fans John Crew and Dave Colson. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.